All right, folks, welcome back, and thank you so much for tuning into the broadcast this evening, this afternoon, actually. I'm Anthony Weeks, and I am the executive producer and host of The Marketplace, Reset and Jumpstart. I'm also the managing director for the Synchroi Economic Development Initiative, better known as SETI. And the work we do is quite intricate. It's quite, if you will, complex. Why, when I say complex? Because it deals with the challenges that we have, the barriers that we have, and those obstacles that we have to overcome as a tiny island economy. Yes, we are part of the United States of America, but we're also uniquely in the archipelago, the Caribbean archipelago, chain of islands. And so today on today's program, what I will do is I will give you an introduction, or in some instances a reintroduction, but more important, the overview of this important, rather significant milestone progress and development in terms of where we see the future, or the present, and where we see the future going forward. And so I want to thank you for being part of the program. So who and what are we? And in its simplest term, we are a nonprofit macroeconomic and public policy organization that deals and focus specifically on economic development, as well as project development and community development. And so we can focus on issues that are very germane to the local community and local economy, and that is the whether it's Synchroi or it's the entire U.S. Virgin Islands. But more important is, how do we align ourselves and how do we position ourselves to allow the U.S. Virgin Islands to be more closely tied to the economic output that we can contribute to. And so that's important because when you think of the U.S. Virgin Islands, as an extension to the United States, we have the benefit of the economic strength, political strength, military strength, but also more important is the responsibility of our geopolitical relationship with the rest of the region. Now, obviously, everything we do is subject to the U.S. Constitution, all of the multilateral and bilateral relationship that the United States have with the rest of the world. So the Caribbean and Central America, or the Americas, if you will, and when we say the Americas, we're talking about North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. That is that's North America. Then there's South America, which represent the continent of South America. Then you have Central America. Central America is part of Latin America. And then there is the English-speaking Caribbean. And then, of course, there is those Latin Caribbean countries as well. So when you want to understand the breadth of the scope of if you will, the region that we are a part of, not just being part of the United States, but being an extension of the United States in the Caribbean archipelago. Again, the archipelago are a chain of islands within the region, and which is represented by the Caribbean itself. And so when we talk about what are the industries, what are the natural resources, what are the scarce resources, what are those, if you will, types of industries that are viable industries within the region, and what are potential industries in the region. And so one of the things we felt it was important to do in terms of our area of value and attribute is, what can we do to leverage the status and the benefit of being part of the United States, the Virgin Islands of the United States, or the United States Virgin Islands. So there are some unique vantage points. There are some unique dynamics that represents our opportunity, not just a small American territory, U.S. territory in the Caribbean, but how do we best position ourselves for cooperation, collaboration, and engagement. And speaking of engagement, so the Caribbean largest trade partner is the United States. They are, when you think of, you hear so much about China, you hear so much about India and their population. Their countries, respectively, per country, China and India have over 1 billion people per country. Okay, China is 1 billion plus, India is 1 billion plus. We in the Americas, which includes the Caribbean, there is over 1 billion people in the Americas. So while you have India and China representing collectively a country, we now talk about us as a region, where you have Canada, United States, Mexico, you have Central America, all the countries in Central America, South America, as well as the Caribbean. And so combined and collectively, that's over 1 billion people. But here is the problem. The problem is you don't have what you see as an example either in Europe or what you see in Asia in terms of the type of strategic alliance, economic alliance, not political alliance, strategic alliance. Why? Because we clearly see the challenge of the region, because the region is so fragmented. So when you think of the region and the archipelago of the region, it is very fragmented. And by virtue of its fragmentation, it creates a fractured ecosystem. And so if we're going to advance, if we're going to progress, if we're going to prosper as a region, we need to start to do more in terms of our cooperation and collaboration with each other. And the U.S. Virgin Islands, being a little tiny island economy, being part of the United States with only 100,000 people, we carry a big stick. We carry a big stick. Now, we not only have the benefit of the U.S. laws, legislation, policy, and regulation, but we also have we're also given special permission and authorization to grow our economy, to do certain things. Things we can do that other Caribbean islands cannot do, that gives us that advantage. And so the one area which we have not developed to its fullest potential is the area of technology. Even though we have the communication infrastructure, that communication infrastructure sits on the tiny island of St. Croix, on the west side of St. Croix, Frederiksted St. Croix. St. Croix houses the second largest fiber optic network in the world to New York. I'm going to say that again. St. Croix is a key, if you will, distribution of the fiber optic that represents 3 important connections of all of the internet traffic that goes up and down the eastern corridor of the United States, of North America, as well as into the Caribbean and in South America. They are over, I would say, I believe it's about 600 million people, between 600 to 700 million people in South America. Okay? And so to be conservative, let's say 600 million. It's more than that, but let's say 600 million people. St. Croix and its population is only 100,000 people. And St. Croix by itself is only 82 square miles. But yet St. Croix has an important asset, an infrastructure that makes it possible for a large continent like South America with 600 to 700 million people to have high-speed internet. And that has been the case for over 20-something years. But we have not been the kind of stewards in terms of how we better leverage and harness that power of technology. So we also have the benefit of where Washington, IRS, and Treasury have given us the economic tool from a policy perspective, legislative perspective, where we're able to attract U.S. companies to the U.S. Virgin Islands, not only under the Economic Development Authority in terms of just general industry attraction and economic development for job creation, but there's a second economic development arm of the U.S. Virgin Islands, and it's the arrow in the quiver or the tools in the toolbox as to how we can develop and diversify our economy. That is the University of Virgin Islands Research and Technology Park. Their job is to go after knowledge-based driven industries and companies to domicile, to relocate to the Virgin Islands. So you have two very different models in terms of how we approach the economy. And so we are authorized, given the approval by Washington Congress and U.S. Treasury and IRS, to provide the tax incentive in order to attract industry, to attract businesses, to in turn to produce job creation. And so while we grapple and deal with the bad news of a long-standing major employer within the refinery, which was just refurbished at over $2 billion and is now in Chapter 11 and is now looking to permanently shutter again through Chapter 11 and looking to send everybody home in September. The question is now, there is going to be a gaping hole in the U.S. Virgin Islands Treasury in terms of its revenues and how it gets revenues from the private sector, and obviously the jobs that it will create and the small businesses that rely on a mammoth economic engine like the refinery. So what happens to us now? What happens to us? What happens to us is we're now confronted where we're going to once again rely on tourism. Tourism accounts for 60% of our GDP. Even though tourism is responsible for 60% of our GDP, tourism, the single largest employer is the U.S. Virgin Islands government. Again, you heard that correctly. The U.S. Virgin Islands government is the single largest employer, larger than the refinery and larger than any other private sector individually. So obviously that doesn't work. And so where and what are the opportunities? Make no doubt, whether we're speaking about the Virgin Islands or we're speaking about the Caribbean region or the Americas, technology dominates the United States of America. Technology dominates Europe. Technology dominates Asia. And so if we are going to stand a chance in the U.S. Virgin Islands as an extension of the U.S. Virgin Islands economy locally in the Virgin Islands, as well as being existence in the region, we have to understand that technology is where the opportunity is, and that is the case for the rest of the region. So that being said, so I'm gonna wrap up by simply saying I'm gonna go to the videotape to reinforce what I'm sharing with you. That we created the Caribbean, the SETI organization created the Caribbean America's single economy. Again, we created an initiative called the Caribbean America's Single Economy, acronym CASE. Why is that important? Because there was a law created back in 2016 by the federal government, by Congress, sorry, and that is called the U.S. Caribbean Strategic Engagement Act. Again, 2016, the United States Congress created, which is now law, and the State Department is responsible for administering that program, and also the execution of it. It's called the United States Caribbean Strategic Engagement Act. And it speaks to a half a dozen area of priorities, everything from the economy, security, education, diplomacy, energy, you name it. It just speaks to a gamut of things. And so by virtue of the U.S. policy that benefits every other state, every other city, every other municipality, the U.S. territories will benefit from the U.S. Caribbean Strategic Engagement Act, which is now law. And so by virtue of that, we felt it was necessary to create the Caribbean America's Single Economy Initiative. Why is that important? Because CARICOM, the Caribbean community, created back in 1989, they did a commission study and they introduced the Caribbean Single Market and Economy. So if it sounds similar, but it's very different, okay? One is driven by the governments of the Caribbean, which is good. And that initiative is called the Caribbean Single Market and Economy. Again, driven by the government and member state of CARICOM. The United States Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico are given the authority, and we have the approval by Congress to be able to be observers in CARICOM. Now, we've been negligent, and we have not been proactive in our participation in CARICOM. So by virtue of the new law called the U.S. Caribbean Strategic Engagement Act, and by virtue of the fact that the United States is the largest trade partner of the Caribbean, generating over $35 billion in trade with the Caribbean, okay? We now have an opportunity as the United States Virgin Islands, being located in the Caribbean, being part of the Caribbean archipelago, to now find ways to create economic relations or economic bilateral relationship that works in concert, that works in conjunction with the U.S. law and its multilateral and bilateral relationship with its trade partners. So we work in concert with that. So SETI, as a nonprofit organization, an NGO, if you will, created an initiative that can serve as a facility, okay, or a platform or a vehicle to partner with government and private sector, or public sector and private sector, to work alongside CARICOM and their proposed wanting to create better movement of people and to better integrate the Caribbean community economies. This is what we are doing. And so under the Caribbean America's Single Economy, introduced by SETI, of that Caribbean America's Single Economy, our technology initiative was once called, and it's still called, Silicon Island, because it speaks to the Virgin Islands itself. But when we start looking at opportunities to collaborate with the rest of the region, obviously there are other regions around the world who are calling themselves Silicon Island. Okay? But if when you go online and you type in the word Silicon Island, SETI dominates the search when it comes to Silicon Island. So that speaks to the Virgin Islands, or specifically St. Croix, and our opportunity to diversify our economy. But we needed to be able to create a brand that speaks specifically to how we position and align ourselves with the rest of the region to collaborate with other Caribbean islands and their efforts and their desire to expand their economy and to collaborate with other economies, which would include the Virgin Islands. Now, that of the CASE initiative, CASE is the Caribbean American Single Economy, our technology initiative is called Archipelo. And Archipelo is a derivative, and it's the definition of, it comes out of the word archipelago. Archipelago, when you think of the Caribbean region and the chain of island, that is called an archipelago. And so the branding and the name Archipelo has derived from archipelago. And that is going to be what we call when we think of, if you will, working with Silicon Valley, New York, Texas, Miami, where there's other U.S. tech hub, and we talk about the Virgin Islands working with the other U.S. hubs, how do we also work with the regional hubs? And that in itself, from a branding perspective, is called Archipelo, a derivative from archipelago. And our slogan is the feel, the sight, the sound of innovation in the archipelago. And that is called Archipelo. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to play, if you will, this presentation that says, obviously, if you're on radio, you're going to hear the music. You're not going to hear sound in this brief video, but you're on television, you'll be able to see what we're talking about. And obviously, if you're online as well, you'll be able to see it as well. And so let's play this piece that speaks to this new initiative that we're introducing. And I just gave you an overview of the opportunity, not just for the U.S. Virgin Islands, to emerge as a viable technology hub, but in partnership with the rest of the region. And that initiative is called Archipelo. Here we go. So there you have it. That is the presentation that speaks to the the rebranding, and when I say rebranding, again, the Silicon Island brand still will reflect and refer to the St. Croix itself, because St. Croix has the infrastructure, the man-made infrastructure called the landing station on the western end of the island in Frederiksted, which is the second largest fiber optic network in the world, second largest to New York. New York has the largest fiber optic network in the world, second. And so St. Croix, an obscure little island that most people don't know about, know nothing about, but we carry a big stick. We have an infrastructure that we have not maximized and leveraged to its fullest capacity. We are working closely, SETI, as a nonprofit macroeconomic and public policy think tank, are working closely with the Economic Development Authority, and we're working closely with the University of the Virgin Islands Research and Technology part. Again, those are institutions that are instruments of the public sector. One is academia, and one is government related, and so therefore, we as a private sector will work with, we are currently working with those entities. Now, in terms of our relationship with the rest of the world, and not just the immediate Americas in terms of Central America, Caribbean, and Latin America, but also Asia is now literally racing to be the next Silicon Valley. There's a mass exodus from Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley has become its success has become its biggest enemy. If I'm saying that right, I don't know if I got that right. Silicon Valley's success has become its biggest enemy. And so you're seeing other technology companies, the big ones that you know, all the big tech companies that you know, and the new startups where they go for the purpose of talent and raising capital. Those companies are leaving Silicon Valley to go to New York, go to Texas, go to Miami, and go through other places in the country. And so we have an opportunity to capture that exodus because we have the landing station, the fiber optic infrastructure, the communication infrastructure, the second largest in the world, but we also have the leverage, the incentive that Washington Congress has given us to be able to incentivize companies to come here, where EDA and the RT Park are responsible for administer it and implement it. So there are things we can do. Now, also on top of the federal level, under the Opportunity Zone, we now, because the Virgin Islands is also a part of the federal mandate, federal law called the Opportunity Zone, and the Virgin Islands is an Opportunity Zone, we also can now stack that incentive with the EDA tax incentive, with the RT Park tax incentive, and now we also can now provide capital gains exemption to sweeten the pot, if you will. So we have policy and we have infrastructure. What has to happen now? We need to start to really make a conscious, deliberate effort to really start to look at how science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, how does science, technology, engineering, and math can be incorporated into our academia community, like with the likes of University of the Virgin Islands, and our schools, okay, our high schools and middle schools, to be able to start to prepare our students to become well-trained and educated in STEM. That's going to be important because STEM is going to be the determinant, the deciding factor as to how well we're going to do in the technology space. So that being said, there's an article that I just wrote, my second article. The first one I wrote was talking about the U.S.-Taiwan economic relationship, which was published in June. And the second one, which is now published, you can go to VI Consortium and read my second article called U.S.-Taiwan education exchange value proposition. And it talks specifically how we can then leverage our relationship with Asia, because Asia they are, if you will, giants in their respective countries in terms of technology, and Taiwan is one of those major technology hubs. And because I serve appointed by Governor Albert as the Special Economic Envoy to Taiwan and Asian Pacific region, I am responsible for helping to position and help to foster and to help to facilitate how we better build a stronger trade relationship with ourselves and Taiwan and the rest of the region. And so from an academic standpoint, we are now in the process of starting to now put in place the education piece where we can do education exchange between ourselves and Asia, specifically Taiwan in this case. And so the Archipelo speaks to chain of islands in the Americas, like Central America and the Caribbean. And then in Asia, you have the Southeast Asian countries and their archipelago. So we're going to build the bridge, if you will, of the archipelago in the Americas, Central America and the Caribbean, and the archipelago, a chain of islands in Southeast Asia. And we're going to build a bridge to better create cooperation and collaboration to create a pretty formidable case, making the case for us being a viable tech hub. And so that being said, I want to now go to the tape and play the Interdevelopment Bank piece. Talks about, the Caribbean and the opportunity for the Caribbean as a digital economy. And let me go straight to the tape on that one. So coming up, here is the IDB talking about the opportunity for the Caribbean as a technology space.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live session, where we will be discussing the digital economy and how it's accelerating private sector development in the Caribbean. I am Kayla Grant, and I'm from the Inter-American Development Bank, the Competitiveness Innovation Division, and I am joined here today by our two experts on the topic. I have here with me Marjorie Straw.
Hi, Kayla.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. She's a manager of corporate initiatives at the Jamaica Promotions Corporation. And I'm also joined here today by Sylvia Donert.
Hey, Kayla.
Hi, Sylvia. And she is the Executive Director of Compete Caribbean, and she's also a lead private sector development specialist here at the bank as well. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Welcome to our live discussion. And also, welcome to everyone who's joining us today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to our discussion that we're going to have today. And now we'll dive right into it. Before we do, I just want to give a special thanks to our audience and to remind you, more importantly, that if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to use the comment section in order to send that over to us, and we'll get to your questions as soon as possible. And don't forget, please like the Inter-American Development Bank page on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest trends in international development. So Sylvia, let's start with you.
Okay.
Sure. So let's start this whole discussion by setting a framework about what the digital economy is. What exactly is it, and why should governments and the private sector pay attention or focus on this particular area?
Yeah. Well, Kayla, in this century, we've seen a wave of digitization and automation of economic activities, massive exchanges of data, more than ever. I mean, all of us own a smartphone. I'm sure that every person in the audience obviously owns a smartphone or a tablet or a computer, and we're all changing the ways that we exchange information, and that's really changing the world, no? Mm-hmm. There's a massive amount of data and massive connections between businesses, people, and data, really, no? And the digital economy is a result of the economic activity that can result between all these massive connections. Right. No? And on top of that, you have new technologies like 3D printing, artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, all taking advantage of this massive interconnection of information and of people and of devices. Why should governments and the private sector adapt to it? First of all, it's changing the way that people do business, no? Because it's changing the way that we as consumers can relate to each other and that we as consumers can relate to businesses, no? So business models are dramatically different than before. We've all heard the famous quote that Uber is the world's largest taxi service provider but owns not a single taxi. Airbnb is the world's largest accommodation provider but doesn't own a single hotel, although now they've bought one in Canada, I wanted to tell you. Facebook, you know, the most popular media outlet, produces no content. Alibaba, the world's most valuable retailer, has no inventory, etc. No? So this massive interconnection of data and of devices provide the ability to offer platforms of services to people across the world. And that gives businesses the opportunity to develop new products, to become more lucrative in the products that they're offering, to become a lot more efficient, and to usher in a new culture of much more sophisticated management. No? For governments, that's also a real opportunity. O sea, governments, the digital economy is changing the way that governments can relate to their citizens. It can make governments a lot more responsive to citizen needs, more efficient in the use of resources. Imagine governments using GPS, for example, to target police efforts to certain particular areas where the crime rate is particularly high and so on. But also because the digital economy is going to completely transform the way that we do businesses, the way that people prepare for jobs and the jobs and the activities of the future. It's very important for the government to offer the kinds of public goods that are necessary for businesses to really take advantage of this opportunity.
Right,
no?
right.
So technological infrastructure is super important. Educational frameworks that really allow people to develop the skills to participate in this new economy. Fiscal incentives to stimulate investment in this new economy, investment in research and development. Those are things that are very, very important. Aside from a regulatory framework that allows online privacy, invest in cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera. For the Caribbean has typically been a region that has been, because of its geographical fragmentation, has always been very isolated. And the physical trading of goods has always been very costly. Now here we have a new technology where you can trade in services and in products that don't need a physical, necessarily a physical exchange. So suddenly you have the whole global demand at the push of a button. That's a great opportunity for businesses in the Caribbean, but it's also a great challenge in terms of governments being able to set the stage so that businesses can take advantage of
Right,
this.
exactly. Absolutely fascinating. We
Yeah.
can touch on many different points
definitely.
there.
Yeah.
But let's stem back to where you're talking about the governments and what's happening in the Caribbean. So Marjorie, if you could, where's the Caribbean in all of this digital transformation that's taking place? And what are some of the factors that's facilitating tapping into the digital economy, as well as some of the challenges that Sylvia began tapping on?
Right, Kayla. Well, you know, the Caribbean, in spite of its unique characteristics, is not immune to what is happening with respect to the digital transformation. There's some, I think, interesting trends that are happening that we should take note of. So, for example, broadband connectivity
Right.
has improved significantly across the region, up to 80% in some countries. There's been a steady increase in subscription for mobile phones. And so that creates an ideal platform for digital platforms to function. So that's also a very important trend. In Jamaica, for example, persons own 2 mobile phones. So, you know, to just give you a sense of the level of penetration across the population. Thirdly, we have good literacy rates. And our population is young, so there is the opportunity to provide skilled labor, you know, to the market. And certainly there are opportunities to build capacity with respect to digital transformation. So those are some interesting trends that can be developed to respond adequately to the digital transformation, digital economy that's occurring. But there are some areas that we really have to look at closely to begin to address. Our GDP growth rate performance is worrisome.
Right.
Within the region, a recent IDB study suggested that if we continue with this sluggish rate of growth, that by 2020, the region will be something like 24% behind Latin America and some of the other small states. We absolutely need a strong macroeconomic system to support the potential investments that we could get in the region to support digital transformation.
Right, right. Very interesting. It sounds like the governments, and as well as the private sector, we have a lot of opportunities as well as challenges that we're facing here as we move towards this area. So maybe Sylvia, you could give us a few examples, because since we're talking about the private sector, maybe a few Caribbean firms that are helping to build this digital economy, and as well as some of their specific constraints that they're facing.
Okay. First, let me tell you that there are more than a few. In almost every country, even in the very small ones, there's at least one digital firm that's making great progress and changing ways that businesses work. So I have my cheat here and go through a few of them. So first of all, I'd like to mention Bit.com. Bit.com is like a very cutting-edge firm. It's based in Barbados and in Trinidad. It's using blockchain technology to provide fast, reliable, and efficient financial transactions between people, and hopefully soon between businesses and people. And of course, using blockchain technology, which is supposedly the new technological paradigm that's going to affect how the fintech world at least is going to operate in the future. No? Okay. Then we have this great Jamaican firm called BookFusion, and it's a firm that allows people that write Caribbean content, Caribbean authors that write Caribbean content for all ages, to sell and distribute and share both physical and digital books in their platform. We have a few firms that work in the agricultural sector, so like Rivo Farm in Jamaica, a firm called Farm in Trinidad and Tobago, that are trying to both solve issues of using business analytics with large data to give losers information about markets, information about weather, but also to connect them with possible markets like the hotel industry. You know, there's always said in the Caribbean that the hotel industry doesn't buy enough locally and so on, and with the restaurant sector. There's firms that are working in the health sector. There's one in Barbados, for example, that's digitizing the whole health management system, including health information. It's like a huge issue. It's going to be using technology that is more advanced even than the one that's being used here in the United States. There are firms dedicated to gaming and using virtual reality and augmented reality in Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, for example. There's a firm that we're very proud of because Compete Caribbean helped support in Trinidad, which developed a shared workflow application on the cloud, and they won Microsoft Partner of the Year Award in 2016. Wow. Yeah. St. Vincent and the Grenadines also has a firm that helps to connect markets to local products, etc. So just to tell you that there are many, and it's just evidence that the sector is growing really fast.
Right.
But as it is growing, it's also encountering a lot of challenges. First of all, this is a sector that relies on swift and constant innovation. So it encounters the same regulatory challenges that other firms in the Caribbean have, like registering a business, etc., just that it's much more, the effect of slowing down the innovation is compounded. Right. Because these firms need to be like really agile. Big constraint for the sector is the poor capacity in the Caribbean to do e-commerce based on two things. One is that PayPal, Stripe, like your typical financial services that offer e-commerce, they do not cover the Caribbean. So you cannot do it on a Caribbean credit card. There are some countries in the Caribbean that allow you to do so, but with very small transactions, and it takes a lot of time. So this really inhibits the capacity of these firms to go global, no?
Nice.
And it's a pity. And the other thing is that there's a large unbanked population in the Caribbean. So that unbanked population is also a market that is not consuming
Needs
digital
to be served,
services.
yeah.
And big opportunities, for example, Bit.com is trying to bank that market. The Digicel, and not necessarily in Jamaica, but in Haiti, for example, big initiative to try to use mobile phones, to move around money and things like that.
Well, even the Bank of Jamaica is looking at looking at fintech and looking at how to use blockchain. So
Exactly.
It is spreading there, yes.
Exactly. And another challenge that they face is the shortage of technical skills. So particularly in the very advanced technologies. But an anecdote that I wanted to post to you, because I thought that it was a really interesting way of seeing how development could happen, is that, for example, Bit.com, located in Barbados because the founder is a Barbadian. They didn't have the programmers in Barbados to really work on blockchain. All over the world, there are 14 jobs per person trained in blockchain. So there's a huge demand all over the world, not only in this case in Barbados because this firm decided to set up there. They started to bring in blockchain programmers, and then suddenly other firms in other parts of the world, like Canada and so on, want to move to Barbados because now there's a cluster of trained labor. And it's an opportunity for the Caribbean. Imagine if, apparently blockchain is not that difficult to learn. Imagine if the countries in the Caribbean were really like stimulating learning in blockchain coding and so on, how quickly this could take off.
Exactly.
Great.
Those are fascinating examples. I had no idea about some of those companies actually in the Caribbean, and I'm sure our audience might be surprised as well. And speaking of our audience, please, let's remember, if you have any questions, please go ahead and post them over to me. And also, we do have our publication. If you'd like to download it and find out more information about it, go ahead and do so. And we'll get to those questions. So I just have one more question. So since Sylvia was talking about the firms, Marjorie, you're from JAMPRO,
yes.
And so could you tell us what Jamaica is doing in the realm of the digital economy and what sort of policies that's being implemented to encourage and to shape this digital transformation?
Sure, Kayla, thanks. Well, the government of Jamaica is embarking on an aggressive e-government policy. Right. Well, firstly, we have the overarching Vision 2030 National Development Plan that's meant to just support all the ICT transformation that's earmarked for the country by 2030. Then there is the Blueprint 2016 report. This report was produced by the CIO's office. Mm-hmm. And really what it does is it makes tangible recommendations for each area, ICT infrastructure, cybersecurity, governance, and one of the key points it makes is that policies should not be divorced from the government's operations. So when we think of digital transformation and digital economy, too often what governments tend to do is they create a policy and disconnect that from the operations of the ministries, departments, and agencies. And this is one of the strongest recommendations that report actually makes. In terms of the eGov, we have the gov.jm, which is the e-government's platform, and that's meant in 3 to 5 years, most of the government transactions will be conducted through that portal. Back office services are now going to be operating from shared services centers. Paying taxes is compulsory for large firms earning over 500 million Jamaican dollars, and the plan is to scale down to smaller firms as well. Mm-hmm. Trade across the region is leaning towards being paperless. In Jamaica, we implemented the Asikuda system, and that's making the entire trade facilitation and interface with customs more of an electronic interface than anything else. We also, government suppliers can now register with government and make their submissions electronically. And then one of our latest initiatives, the government of Jamaica is working on a smart city concept. Kingston is earmarked as one of the cities, and the work is targeted for the new Kingston, which is like the commercial financial hub of Kingston. What we've done to date is we've strengthened the grid in collaboration with JPS for a more reliable supply. They've converted some 300 streetlights into what they're referring to as smart lights. And really what this does is just adjust their brightness according to the degree of activity within a particular area. And they're also working towards having the traffic lights gauging, the flow of traffic to, high congestion times in traffic and so on. So quite a few exciting things are happening across government, actually.
Very nice. Go Jamaica. We'll definitely be keeping track of the progress
Thank you.
that you guys are making in this area. And now we have a few minutes left, so we'd like to start answering a few questions that we have from the audience. I'll start with Rishi Maharaj, who's from Trinidad and
All right, so let me end there because they're obviously going to get into the Q&A with the panel, the Interdevelopment Bank panel, IDB, on the Caribbean and its potential for a digital economy. Again, I've written a second article which you can find at the consortium that speaks to the U.S. Taiwan education exchange value proposition. And I go into detail in a lot of what I talked about today. You'll also be able to read that as well. So you're able to, if you like to learn more about what I've talked about, the article itself is published. It was published yesterday in the VI Consortium, and it says it's called the U.S. Taiwan Education Exchange Education Exchange Value Proposition. And let me just close by saying, here is why this is so important. We condition our minds to think of job creation, where someone physically gets up, get themselves together, jump in whatever mode of transportation, drive from home to a job. One of the things coming out of the pandemic is how the work environment has changed. You're now seeing not only work, but how business is conducted, a virtual environment. And now people are now opting to work remotely. So what we're able to do, we're able to train Virgin Islanders to not only support businesses that are located in the Virgin Islands, but to be able to work remotely. Virgin Islanders in the Virgin Islands trained and educated and trained with the right skill sets where they can work from the Virgin Islands, having your cake and eat it too, working from the Virgin Islands for other companies from around the region, from around in the United States and around the world. So this is the fascination about this. The old way of thinking, well, we create jobs because, companies are going to have to move here. They're going to have to, set up shop here. We can create, the Archipelo model is going to facilitate a virtual economy, a virtual workforce where Virgin Islands can train and have the skill sets to be able to not only support businesses, employers here in the territory, but employer anywhere working remotely. So this is key. This is fascinating stuff. So the sky's the limit. I mean, it's incredible. So again, I want to thank you. This has been the third segment of the Marketplace Reset and Jumpstart. I'm Anthony Weeks for the Marketplace on business, economy, and public policy. And you can certainly learn more about what we're talking about. You simply go to CASE, that's spelled CASE, report, REPORT.news. CASEReport.news. And you'll learn a lot about, you'll be able to, if you missed this live program, you'll be able to watch the program. But most important, our new platform, the WSDX Bloomberg Caribbean Broadcasting Platform, bringing you the latest breaking developing news in business, in markets, in the economy, and of course, what's happening in Washington. Thank you so much. I hope you have a pleasant rest of the day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.